Welcome to this session of the DoD Modernization Exchange. My guest is Jeff Marshall, the Director for Hosting and Compute at the Defense Information Systems Agency. Jeff, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you. Appreciate you letting me be here with you.
Jeff, you've been in your role just for about a year now, also known as the J9 moniker, as DISA reorganized itself about a year and a half ago or so. You came in from industry. Talk a little bit about that experience. What have you learned so far? How's it been over the last year?
Well, honestly, Jason, this last year has been kind of phenomenal. I really had no clue what to expect coming in, other than my wife, who has been in government for about 27, 28 years. So a lot of the stories I heard were secondhand through her. So when I came in, it was a level of caution plus a level of excitement, and tapered off with, what can I do? How can I provide back to the government and to just kind of giving what I failed to give when I was an enlisted soldier back in the day. Kind of the biggest surprise for me, I guess, is within J9 at least, it's the construct that we're working on a working capital fund. And so for me, in that model of fee for service, it's really important that I understood and took back the narrative that I work for the customer being the DoD warfighter. And so in that respect, it was kind of easy and familiar for me to get back into that mindset. But then when I realized, as part of one of the challenges with that, is that the people around me within J9, they still were kind of holding on to that traditional mindset of appropriated funds come in, we do things, and you just do what we need you to do, or you don't. And so we kind of had to change that narrative within J9 to get everybody on board with customer centricity.
I definitely want to talk about changing the narrative, but let me take it just a half a step back. Coming to a fee-for-service organization, that's very similar to a industry side where profit and loss drives a lot of it. In government, you don't really worry about profit and loss, but you can't also not make enough money to cover your expenses, otherwise it's a problem. Was that what attracted you to this position at the Hack, or was that kind of, as I found out more about it, that made it more attractive?
Definitely the second. Really I came in because the job announcement was right up my alley. It was cloud operations, everything to do with a global cloud environment. And I saw this even coming from private industry as kind of a step up into a breadth of responsibility that I don't know I could have gotten any time sooner, because early on I did 12 years of Army, and so that was 12 years of loss in doing things in this realm, in cloud and in leadership. So this was really a good step forward in that respect for me.
And at the same time, you imagine your background, you understood the technology side, you probably had experience in cloud, so you were learning, the learning, if you will, the curve was not as steep as maybe if you said, I'm going to go into something like logistics or something like building ships that maybe you hadn't done before.
Right.
You probably, the familiarity with kind of the profit and loss idea, the familiarity with cloud made this transition probably not as steep of a curve. Do you feel that way, or is it
Yes.
all, it's DoD, so the curve, no matter what you could do, it's steep?
No, it was definitely easier for me to step into the role. In fact, it was easy enough that Sharon Woods at the time, who had hired me on, who was the director of J9, when they asked her to step over into J6 to take over that operation, that directorate, she without a hesitation said, Jeff can do it. And so, I've been acting up until about January of this year, and it's just been great. The team is great around me. A lot of the experiences that I had coming in from private industry around cloud and understanding cloud operations on a global scale, understanding things like marketing and sales, they've really helped what we're trying to do, the envelopes that we're trying to push, and the modernization that we're trying to take on within the J9.
Let's go down that path. Perfect segue. Thank you for doing that. Made my life so much easier. You talk about changing the narrative of being more customer focused. What does that look like today with the J9? What are you doing that maybe hadn't been done or hadn't needed to be done previously?
That's a great question. It's a twofold strategy. There's an external strategy, and then there's the internal strategy. On the internal side, we have to look at what we actually offer to the warfighter, and we have to decide does it still make sense to continue to offer that? And so right now we're going through a process of putting together a product governance model that's going to allow us through committee and then through a board to really look at our offerings and make some strategic decisions about, do we keep it, do we combine it, do we get rid of it altogether, or do we expand it? And so what we're having to do with that product portfolio mindset is we're having to really look at things like not just the finances behind it. You know, we talked earlier about you don't want to make a profit, but at the same time you don't want to lose money. We have to do a better job of that. We have to really understand from a marketing perspective of what is it that we offer, at what price point, does it make sense to the customer, in this case the warfighter, and then how are we actually recouping our costs without, you know, just throwing things into the burden bucket in order to just to cover costs down on it. So we're really doing things around that internally. And then on the external side, we have a organization within the J9 that was put together before I got there. I'm just taking credit for it, thanks Sharon. And it's the Hybrid Cloud Broker Office. So this broker office was initially designed to basically go out and let everyone in DoD know what we have, what our solutions are, and then to basically set up the segue for a customer in the DoD to come to DISA and to come to J9 and to get something like the JWCC contract or to get more data center capacity. Well, when I saw that, I realized that these are a bunch of guys who've been in the government, and they're not necessarily salespeople. They're not necessarily marketing people. So we engage with the strategic partners, and in that respect, it's all about meeting them where they are and providing them with what they need. We actually have a phrase that we call the right solution for the right purpose in the right location. So the Hybrid Cloud Broker, we set them up into 3 segments. The first segment is a public-facing sales force. The second segment is a customer success team who is there to help conduit between what the warfighter is needing from us as we already support them. And then the third is an actual marketing segment, something that was very new to the J9 and I think to government at this point. But I was able to take what I knew from Dell in order to incorporate that into it. And so initially my focus was on the customer success segment. I really wanted the team to understand that we just don't survive without the customer, without the warfighter. And so we really had to spend some time on what does that mean, how do we go about that as a strategy, and then how do we engage with the existing customers in order to allow them to understand that we're here for them, we're here to listen, we want them to be a part of a feedback loop in order to provide better service to them and improve the quality of the product that they get, and then to also hear what their demand is for what else they'd like to see out of it. With that, I then focus on the marketing aspect. I've been looking at our website, hack.mil, and looking at what can we do to actually modernize that? What can we do to make it more, have a feel of private industry in the sense that we have great products. How do we showcase those so that the warfighter can easily understand and ingest what it is and decide that they need that or not, and then be able to talk to that sales team on the front end to do that. And then the last piece of this, which I felt was really interesting for us to do, it was to put together a catchphrase we call why before what. And what that means is that I told all 3 of the segments, the Hybrid Cloud Broker in general, that I want to start using a problem solution framework. And what that means is don't go at a customer, don't go at the warfighter and say, hey, I've got all these great products, this is what I'm going to give you, this is what you need because this is the greatest thing ever. It is the best widget you have ever heard of in your life. It never works. I already had learned that 5 years ago. And so taking that same approach here, now what we do is we say, hey warfighter, what's your cloud problem? What is your hybrid cloud problem that you're trying to solve for that you may or may not even understand? Let us work on that first with you. And then from there what we'll do is we'll focus on what we think solutions could be for that, what we think the optionality could be for that. And then and only then do we start talking about what products and services that the J9 hack has that can help support that. And then with all of that, we bundled it all up into what we call the smart cloud journey.
A lot to dig out of that. Let me start with the last bit you said, this idea of why before what. And a lot of times folks don't know what they don't know. Hey, I'm trying to solve this problem. I didn't even think I could use a cloud service, or I could use a DevSecOps experience or the platform. So I think understanding that question first is that long first step in the long journey, right?
Yes.
Is that also a change for your customers? Because it's one thing to get me as someone who works for you to understand it, but if that's not the way I've ever interacted with DISA before, and or it's not the way, no one's ever really asked me that question before. Talk a little bit about what you saw about because you're changing the narrative in both ways.
Yes, absolutely. A quick story around that. So we also started something that we call the VIP engagement. So it's basically me as the SCS going out and meeting a peer in another DAFO or service or a combatant command, and talking to them at our level about the strategy of what we're trying to provide and the strategy of their problem set that they're trying to solve for. So early on in this, we came up with what the script would look like, and we set this up for myself and the DLA CIO. We showed up, you could see it in their face right off the bat. Here we go again. I got another vendor coming in to tell me what I need to get from them and why it's such a great product. And then the very first question I started off with, I've said, how are things going for you? How is your cloud journey going? Just immediately you could see the stress kind of relief in his face. And from that point, we were able to have a great conversation about the problems, his cloud problems that he was trying to solve for. And from there, we realized that he didn't just have cloud problems. He also had data center problems. He had mainframe problems. He had problems in understanding how to get from one step to the next step to the final step, which is a native cloud environment. And we focused all on that. I think we spent most of the hour just focusing on the problem. And then we would come back and we would talk to him about, hey, here's some solutions and some ideas and pathways we can think about as we work through this. And for me, again, because this is government, not private industry, I'm not looking for a profit. If we just stop there at the solution, I'd be okay, because I've helped him. I've helped DLA with optionality into getting ultimately where they want to get to.
Right, if he decides, and we've talked to Daryl Roberts many times, the DLA CIO, a friend of the network, if he says, you know, Jeff, I think I'm going with cloud provider A or B instead of DISA, you still made a difference. Exactly. And in the end, that's what you and a lot of other federal employees want to do is make a difference, not sell something to your company that makes a profit.
Exactly.
So I think it's a great perspective that I think sometimes does get lost in the government to government discussion. Let me go all the way back to the beginning. The internal stuff you mentioned, a board, a governance board. Walk me through what that looks like. Is it people from DISA? Is it all over DISA? Do you bring in the people from the CIO shops at Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, et cetera? How does that board work to decide what is important to deliver in terms of services or products?
So it's actually an interesting concept. Externally, we have the customer feedback loop. So with that, using Salesforce, we actually engage in the customer and we ask them sort of things like CSAT. How are you satisfied with what you have? And then we also ask demand signal, and this is something kind of new for the team to do, and I'm kind of ramping them up better with the messaging and how to actually do it. And so we have, to kind of answer your question in the first respect, it's more of an internal governance within J9. The way it works internally is we're going to have a technology committee who will look at whatever the product or service is from a technology perspective, ask the right questions, go through a checklist, and decide if it makes sense or not, and then what their recommendation is. From there, they're going to talk to and hand it over to a business committee. The business committee, also within J9, they look at it from a perspective of, can it be resourced well? does it really meet the acquisition guidelines and the FAR? And from a budget and financial perspective, does it make sense business-wise to go after this thing, whatever it is? Because maybe it's going to take a lot of amount of money on the front end to do, and that doesn't make sense for us. It may be something in an area that we just don't want to do as a core competency of J9. And so from that perspective, it may not make sense. Once we have the recommendations from the two committees, it'll come up to the senior leadership within J9 to the governance board, and then we will make a decision about whether we go with it or whether we disapprove it. And again, if it's an existing product, we may keep it, we may get rid of it, we may expand it if the financials look right, or we may look at how can we combine that with something else we have in order to make a better product family, if you will.
At one point, do you send all that up to the commander of DISA, the director of DISA? Is there other layers, or is it, if the J9 in the end says, Stratus is the future or Stratus is ending, either way, that's a 90% done deal per se.
It could go either way.
Yeah.
It depends on the level of service that it is. If it's something internal that we're only kind of concerned about doing, then we can take care of it internally. Again, because it's a just enough type governance where we're not trying to overweigh everybody else. However, if it's something that is of value, benefit, or concern to DISA or a large mission set of strategic partners, yes, then we're going to go through the DISA governance process and make sure that it gets to the director for a decision.
And we'll talk about the fun joint warfighting cloud capability later, but imagine if it's like the next generation of that goes all the way through the chain.
Absolutely.
As something. I know you guys have an RFI on the street back in December, so we'll
and honestly,
get there in a second.
I don't want to put something in front of DISA that makes no sense, even to us.
Right.
But sometimes in the past, I've seen it and I've heard it from previous folks that the good idea fairy will go ahead and put something forward and spend a lot of time and effort putting the numbers and the content around it together just to go, this does not make sense to DISA, why are we doing this? So I want to keep that from happening.
At the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned changing the narrative within, and you went through the hybrid cloud setup and the three kind of external sales, customer success team, marketing. That's one piece to the puzzle. Are there other pieces of the way you've changed the narrative within the J9 so far?
The culture, I would say. We've really gone after changing how J9 views leadership, how J9 views itself, and how J9 is refocusing on customer centricity. Again, coming from private industry, I'm used to a culture of, I need something from Group A, I can go to Group A and we can have a conversation about it, and we can get something to come out of it, and if Group A needs to let their leadership know, Group A will do so. The hierarchy here kind of gets in the way of that sometimes. It can bog down the bureaucracy of what we're trying to do. And so in that respect, I let people know frequently, I get it, I understand we have a hierarchy and we'll work with that when we need to. However, because I am trying to instill an agile mindset into the J9 so that we can get things done faster. What I realized early on last year was we're about 5 years behind industry on getting technology out there. And it's technology that the warfighter needs today, not in 5 years from today. So how do we do that? I do it by understanding the acquisition process and understanding where I can make A and B come closer together in order to get to C. It's also about changing the way that internally we actually approach the work that we do, using an agile mindset and using agile delivery mechanisms. So I'm very much into all of J9, whether it is product focused or whether it is the support services around that we really are going after DevSecOps and infrastructure SecOps as our mindset on how do we get things done. I highly encourage innovation. Failure is a learning experience. It is not something to be shunned from in J9.
And the reason why you can encourage innovation is because you are a fee-for-service organization. You want to try something and see if anyone likes it, see what the demand signals are. Maybe everyone loves to talk about AI. I'm sure we'll get there eventually. Maybe it's an AI tool that you put out there. Oh, okay, there's not a lot of cost for us, but no one seems to like it or use it or be interested. Okay, let's take it down. There's a low level of risk, and I think that people have to be okay with that. And I think for a lot of times in government, that's tough to accept that. Okay, failure is an option.
Right. Exactly. 100%.
Can you talk a little bit about the encouragement of innovation? Obviously, all the changes you're making, there's a lot going on here. How are you dealing? How are you adding innovation on top of all this change management that's going on?
It's kind of really the same as what I did at Dell. I go out and I'm looking at things like various magazines, various articles, various opinions, especially from the big tech companies on what is current and modern today. And I look at that and I go, is that something that we could do? Is that something that the warfighter can use in their process, in their operations, rather than, I can sell them something? And so what I'll do is I'll initially germinate that idea within my technology director or the business office, and I will say things like, hey, AI as a service, what would that look like for us? What can we do in that space that keeps us from overlapping with what we want industry to do on our behalf, but we can still go after? And so when we talk in those terms, and when I ask questions rather than say, go do this, it allows the team to feel a sense of ownership of what that is. Right now, I've got a great team within the product development and management office that I have. These guys are chomping at the bit for AI as a service. And I posed a question. I gave them a white paper a while ago, and I said, what could we do with this? What could we as DISA put together as AI as a service? What would the components of that even look like? What would we offer? And right off the bat, the very first thing they said is, oh, it looks like we need something GPU related. Everybody wants GPUs. I said, okay, how can we do that with some of the other things that we're doing? For instance, we do infrastructure as capacity rather than buy it from capital. And when we do that and we combine with what we can get from our capacity contract, now all of a sudden I can offer GPU as a capacity service, and I can give it and I can take it away, and I don't have to worry about the cost to me because it's a very dynamic situation for me as well as for any warfighter customer.
All right, there's two things you missed in that answer. Number one, you said when you look for stories, you say the first place I go is federalnewsnetwork.com. I think it must have slipped your mind. I think it was in your notes. I think I wrote it there. But the second thing is, okay, you just told me I'm looking for ideas. Your email now will be blown up by vendors even more. So maybe talk a little bit about how you want to interact with the vendor community, because now they heard you say, I'm looking for innovation. I'm looking for what they're working on. How could I bring this in? What do you want from them?
Oh, that's easy. And I do want it, absolutely. What I want from the vendors is I want them to take the ideas that they have, what they see as working as a strategy, and what they could see that private industry is doing today that they normally wouldn't get to the warfighter to be able to make use of in 5 years, and how they can bring that to me today through, again, the hybrid cloud broker. That's my conduit to vendors as well. And from there, I want them to pitch it. I want them to give it to me. And I started off usually with the technical director listening to it, because they'll know if it's something that's in our core competency to be able to utilize or not. I've done it at least 3 or 4 times already since I've been here, and out of that we've had at least 1 or 2 good things that we've been able to look at how to incorporate over this next year.
I think that's important. I think the vendor community sometimes always are looking to, hey, what's the RFP coming? Hey, what can I bid on? Versus, hey, we know that you are trying to meet this goal, and here's some technology behind that we're using internally or that we've delivered to other people within DoD, and we're seeing a demand signal that maybe makes sense for you all to offer as a service. I think those conversations don't happen enough. I'm sure they do to some extent, but probably not quite enough. And it's great to see that you're open to those conversations as well.
Well, it's actually interesting because that is probably one of the biggest areas of learning curve for me. In industry, I could go talk to vendor X and say, hey, how can you meet this? And they will tell me, we can do it 100%, this is what it would look like and this is what it would cost. And I could go, okay, let's do that. In government, I can't do that. I have to go, ooh, that's a great idea. I'm going to have to write up what I'm looking for, and then I'm going to have to go and get this competed, of which you can be a part of that competition, and then we'll see how things go from there. So that one's definitely interesting for me to deal with.
And unless you go the OTA route, but that's a whole different discussion.
Exactly.
Jeff, we've been talking a lot about the current status of the J9, how it's kind of evolved to a different narrative, to a different kind of setup. Early on in that part of the conversation, you mentioned the smart cloud technology, this approach to cloud that's maybe a little different, maybe new, maybe updated strategy. Start with me. What does that look like? What are all the pieces and parts to it?
Absolutely, Jason. Early on, again, the private industry side of me knew 5 years ago where cloud was at and where it was going. And the one thing that I heard when I first got into the government in the J9 was cloud, cloud, cloud. And I went, oh, okay, what do we mean by that? And everybody was, that means commercial cloud. And I said, ooh, really? Oh, we should probably relook at that again. And luckily, DoD CIO had already done that. So the phrasing back in the early times was cloud, get the cloud, get the cloud. And everyone moved out to cloud. And you had some success, you had some that were like okay with it, yet performance wasn't what they thought it would be. And then you had the third group that was just like, oh, this was a disaster, why did we do this? And so I took that on as we really need to incorporate the components that J9 already has in place and put them together into this kind of marketing type package called the Smart Cloud Journey. It's a three-pronged approach, if you will. It is traditional hosting that we have in our Tier 3 data centers. It is private cloud that we also host, Stratus, and that is also in our data centers and is also global. And then it is the JWCC contract vehicle where we can get task orders for a warfighter customer in order to get them into a commercial cloud, one of the CSP providers. This is for us what we have taken back the phrase of hybrid cloud to mean. Traditional, private cloud, commercial cloud. It's all three. It's also a pathway for us. For me and for DoD, the ultimate goal is for DoD to get to cloud native applications running in a CSP. It makes sense. They're able to offer at economy of scale, and with their competition, they're able to give things at a price point that really makes sense for DOT to move our stuff into. Got it. However, the customers are not always ready to do that right now. We know this is greenfield. When you're spinning something up new and you can look at cloud in a cloud native application set, you can do it right away in cloud. Got it. However, a lot of what DoD has is still traditional hosting. It's even mainframe. It is monolithic applications, and they don't have the time, resources, development cycles, or even money sometimes in order to do greenfield versions of that. So with that, we still talk about, let's talk about that problem of you need to continue to host traditional data in a data center. We've got you covered with a solution for that. You are able to migrate some of that into a private cloud space because it's monolithic application, and our private cloud Stratus makes sense to host that. Or you're ready to move into the cloud native application space. We're there to help you with that. We're here to help you get to a solution that looks right for you. We're here to help you manage that however we can and support it in every way possible that we can do as well. So for us, that is the Smart Cloud Journey.
It's the crawl, walk, run. When you're going to crawl into a different data center, maybe you're going to leave your data center within Service 1, but move it into the DISA one. It's still protected. It's still a very familiar place. Right. Okay, now I'm ready to walk a little bit. I can go to Stratus, which is a private cloud hosted by DISA, but I'm still cloudy. And then when you're ready to run, you go to the CSPs. When you look at all three of those, what's the trends you're seeing? Are people leaning into Stratus, leaning into CSPs, or you're going to tell me it depends?
It's all of the above.
I felt it coming. It depends.
Is all of the above. It really depends on where a strategic partner is at with their ability to develop and at what speed they're able to develop at. Again, one of the new things that we're looking to spin up this year, we're calling it Fangorn. And what this is, it's a mainframe refactoring platform. We're not going to do the refactoring ourselves. However, we're going to offer a platform that will use AI that will be able to help a mission partner, a strategic partner that is using mainframe, who just cannot get off that old COBOL code. We're going to help them to be able to refactor that so they can move it into a virtual machine space. And then they can go to Stratus. And then from there, that gives them the time to figure out how do they want to then move from that into a cloud-native distributed model.
First of all, let's spell the new thing, Fangorn.
Oh, that's its actual name.
Okay, because I was like,
no acronym there.
I had to figure out what the acronym was. But that is, I'm hearing more and more folks in the technology community in the federal sector really taking a hard look at using AI to update old code. It seems to have gotten to the point where now this is, easy is not the right word, but people are comfortable with it. Is that what you're finding, that this AI to update code is that the demand signals are real, I guess? The
demand signal is real. The regulations and governance around it have to catch up.
In what way? Can you talk a little bit about what maybe some of the challenges?
People like the concept. They just, all of a sudden, they start thinking Terminator when you start talking AI.
Of course.
And so they really want to understand what is the left and right boundaries of what they can do with AI, and what does it allow to do for them versus what should a person do around it. And so with that in mind, we really need a strong set of what do we know about the data, how do we tag it properly, where's that data kept at, and what security is around it. And then, oh, by the way, let's talk about how do we do that data at different classification levels. All that is still kind of in the infancy stage of building that policies and procedures around, so that we can then get industry to bring in the AI tool set that can make use of that data, that can then do that refactoring and pull the code into such a way that it makes sense for a strategic partner.
Two things come to mind when we talk about a new offering. Is there a timing that you can talk to? Later this year, much later this year, soon enough? Is there any contracts around it, or have you already made an award, or is this all internal technology?
We've been working on it through an OTA, the Fangorn piece, and so we expect that that should be awarded sometime in the next couple of months. I'm not exactly sure of the date, but we're ready for it, and we're looking forward to working with some of our DAFAs as we help them move into the modernization.
All right. Again, thinking of our industry folks who are watching, let them know this is already in process. It's not a new opportunity that they'll be able to bid on. Sounds like you already are looking at bids in some way.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about cloud. One big priority for the DISA director is Oconus Cloud.
Yes.
What are you seeing down that path? What are some of your big goals for 2025 and beyond?
So Oconus Cloud is kind of our blanket phrasing, if you will. It's made up of two parts, and actually three parts if you think about it, because we also have our traditional data centers. We have coverage in Indo-PACOM. We also have coverage in EUCOM, and we have coverage in Southwest Asia. So we have our traditional data centers that can do that hosting. The next step, of course, is to have that private cloud piece. So we have Stratus. We have Stratus at the different classification levels as well, and also in all three COCOM regions. And then we also have Joint Operational Edge, JO, and we have that. We're starting to deploy that. We have two instances in Indo-PACOM. We have one in EUCOM, and right now we're deploying one node in Southwest Asia as well. So what is JO? A lot of people keep asking that. It's real simple if we think about it. We have Stratus, which is private cloud. We host that, and that's for monolithic virtualization. JO is an extension of a CSP's commercial cloud environment that we can place in one of our data centers in an Oconus location where they can then push out to the edge various pieces of cloud native application.
So you've had the two instances. What are some of the things you're seeing from those instances? It's working, obviously. I'm sure you've got some good lessons learned that you're starting to apply to this third node in Southwest Asia.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Great story there. We've actually been a couple of collaborations. The first was with the Air Force's research lab. On our Joe node over in Indo-PACOM, we're actually doing a fully isolated, fully provisioned. It's in the accreditation stage now of a SIPR-based LLM. So maybe you've heard of Nipper GPT. We're working with them to deploy a SIPR GPT for Indo-PACOM. Now, again, want to make sure everyone understands, we're not trying to deploy this on our own. We're not trying to make it a production system. This is an R&D system that we're using for Indo-PACOM in order to test large language models overseas. So it's for evaluation, informing, and then of course creating the ability to fast track commercial AI tools in classified regions over there.
We had Alexis Bonnell on our AI and data exchange just a couple months ago. She's a super innovative person. I'm sure that's someone you're working closely with on this as well. And I heard actually a great story, I think from one of your colleagues, I want to say maybe Steve Wallace, talking about Nipper GPT. He had told me a story that DISA was looking at something very similar, and then when they saw Air Force do it, they just said, okay, enough with our program, let me just take theirs and borrow and build upon it and use it. And I thought that was a great example that we don't hear enough in government. So I'm excited for this SIPR GPT as well. Timing-wise, it's close to accreditation, so obviously sometime this year, this summer, this spring?
Oh, it's very close to accreditation. I expect that they'll be able to open it up within the next month or so.
And the idea behind that is see how it works, get the lessons learned, and see where it can take you next. Do we expand it broader? Do we keep it in the R&D world? Do we?
Right.
It's that first step in that, again, long journey, like cloud and like everything else.
And honestly, what it does is it helps facilitate that demand signal of what does an Indo-PACOM commander need and want to utilize AI for, and then how do we then shape that to what industry can actually provide for us at scale. So that's really the awesomeness that we're doing. And I love the fact that we're very close with AFRL on this. There's no competition there. It's a one-team concept, and it's working out really well for us.
The other side of the OCONUS cloud is you have the 3 nodes. Are you looking at other expansion? Are there opportunities to look at AFRICOM, expansion to look at European Command to add cloud to those tactical edge areas?
Yes, absolutely. However, we're being very mindful of resources. We're being mindful of the demand signal. And of course, we're being mindful of budgets. So again, pulling my knowledge from industry, we're looking at, all right, let's don't just throw it all out there at one time and hope that it sticks to the wall. We're taking in the demand signal. We're making sure that there is a valid need that supports us doing the deployment. And then of course, there's budget to cover it. And so we're working on all that now. Indo-PACOM, we have a few out. We're looking potentially for a few more. In Europe, again, we have one that we have in place. We have another that is getting ready to go. Those are going to be a set that will support for EUCOM and AFRICOM. And then from there, we're going to go out and we're going to sell it. We're going to sell the concept. We're going to find the problems that Europe is having, and especially as we talk about things like coalition. Coalition is huge now. And we see the Joe platform and the Stratus platform helping to play a pivotal part in the infrastructure that can support at the edge coalition cloud.
That's what I hear time again when I hear folks from DISA or the Army or whomever, hey, we have to figure out the edge. And I heard Randy Resnick speak recently from the DoD Zero Trust Office. Hey, we're going to come up with a Zero Trust overlay for the edge. So I think there's a whole focus on that area. We talked Stratus a little bit. We talked Joe. Let's talk about the other J word, JWCC. Give us an update. We know that there's a thinking about what's coming next as well. But start with the current JWCC contract. What are you seeing from that?
So it is going really well. It's being endorsed by the services. We just recently worked through a set of problems that the Army had, and we heard them. We pulled the team together. A lot of us worked on this over the last month or month and a half, I would say. And with that, we pulled together a good set of demand that the Army was looking for, that the other services are going to be able to utilize as well. So with that, we have 107 task orders as of right now. We've got 78 FAR 51 authorizations. And I love this one, our average days from request to award is 38 days. So again, agile mindset, doing things better, more productive with automation tools is really helping that. And then as of right now, the total life cycle amount is $2.4 billion, and we just expect that to grow. So now what? That's what everyone's asking. Well, the now what is the next version, the next plateaued generation, if you will, of JWCC, which we're calling JWCC Next. This is looking to do the expansion. How do we get more CSPs involved in what we're offering so we can get better competition? How do we offer more services? How do we allow a mission partner or a strategic partner to get things off of the marketplace? And then there's a few other things like reserve instances that are coming up as something that is highly desired. So with that, we're really looking to work with DAFAs, the services, the combatant commands, and really say, what do you need? What are you trying to get? What are we offering that you liked? What would you have us do better? And we're taking all that in so that we can start to craft this out. And so with that, once we get all this information, then we're going to make an official announcement on the next phase of where we're at with JWCC Next.
I know you had released an RFI. Those responses, I'm sure, are coming in.
Yeah.
Is there anything, have you started looking at them yet, or is it a bit too early to say any trends or anything stands out to you about what are you hearing?
Other than the things I've just talked about, where they're looking for more CSP involvement, they're looking for more things along the lines of SaaS offerings and how that can be done at scale and enterprise-wide, and then things like reserve instances. Those are high on the desired list.
Okay. Going back to JWCC, you said 107 task orders, about $2.4 billion in expected
life cycle.
So obviously it's different between obligations and total sales. And just let's clarify, 78 FAR 51 authorizations. Does that mean the ability for, I'm in the Army, I can place an order, a task order against JWCC?
Through a contractor, yes.
Yeah.
So an integrator is usually who those are.
So the 78 are integrator X works with CSP Y?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification, because once we start talking far parts, people, see, you probably had to learn that as part of.
I really did.
Each night you kept saying to your wife, honey, do you know that FAR Part 51? She's like, I'm asleep. That's what my wife tells me when I start talking the minutiae of government, so don't worry. The last piece of this I just want to touch upon in our last few minutes we have together is another big piece called Vulcan, which is a DevSecOps platform. You mentioned that earlier. You want to be more agile. You want to be more ability to give people what they want and iterate. What's the latest with Vulcan? Some changes are coming?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this was us looking at what does DISA offer, and we offer two different things. We offer Vulcan, which is a DevSecOps tool set, and then our DISA PEO services under Caroline Bean offered Citadel, which was an entire DevSecOps pipeline. So we looked at it as DISA and we said, does this make sense? Why are we doing two different things? And so we got together and we said, let's put them together and let's put them where they really should be. And so with that, we are taking Vulcan off of the J9 product list and we're moving it over to PEO services under Ms. Bean. And with that, she is going to now offer what eventually she's going to call DISA DevSecOps. And it's going to be at least two things initially. It's going to be Vulcan, which will be a tool set that can still be offered as is, because we don't want to interrupt anyone who's using the tools. But then on top of that, that tool set is going to be incorporated into what she was using, Citadel, as a DevSecOps pipeline. And so those two things together, DISA, DevSecOps, it will be coming out at some point in the future, and everything about it will be great, where we can offer an end-to-end type solution for a strategic partner or even internally within DISA.
And I just have a hunch, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, it'll be connected back to all those, the cloud offerings, the smart cloud framework that you talked about, whether it's the data centers or on-premise, Stratus, or the CSPs.
Yep, absolutely. It's going to be a multi-tool.
And the fact you're working closely with the other PEO just shows the importance of, hey, this is not just, I'm on the J9, I'm by myself, let me do my thing. I have to have that partnership.
Absolutely. I am not an island, and I do not like to be treated like an island.
That's a good thing to keep in mind, because there's so much of this that's interconnected and integrated. Jeff, we're just about out of time. Before I let you go, I'm going to ask you, what's the big message you want to make sure both industry and government get about where DISA Hosting and Compute J9 is heading over the next, again, 6-9 months to a year?
For me, it's real simple. We are not the DISA of old. With the leadership we have, myself included, how I've come in with this refreshing, they're saying, leadership style that is different than what anyone has known. People are starting to get used to it. They're starting to understand that I have no ulterior motive, that I'm really looking out for the best interests of J9 and DISA. It's a concept called first team, actually, where you don't care about your own organization. Your care and concern is about your parent organization. And if you do that and you talk with your peers in that sense of, hey, I don't care about what I do, I care about how we together can do what is best for, in our case, DISA. And so taking that kind of concept, we're really going after, how can we be more streamlined, efficient, effective, agile? How can we make our portfolio better? How can we make it what is actually needed and required for the warfighter? And so we're working on those things, and part of that, of course, is the Oconus Cloud, getting that out there, and then just kind of modernizing the mindset within J9 to basically let them know that innovation is good, that failure is okay as long as you learn a lesson from it and you don't make the same mistakes again. And then just pushing the envelope of, how do I get from where we're at today with potentially a 5-year product cycle to something way less than that. If I could get things done in 6 months to 1 year and get it out the door and into a warfighter's hands so that they can make good decisions on the battlefield or in theater, I am going for that. I'm going to do everything I can to help success for that warfighter and for that commander. And I do that through technology and how we rethink how we're doing things, and we rethink what our products actually are, and we rethink, how do I actually execute what we're doing?
Taking a refreshing view of how you're going to look at products, services, how you're going to make it faster, better, cheaper. I think all that's going to be a welcome experience from across DoD. Unfortunately for us, we're out of time for today. This has been a great conversation. So let me thank my guest. Jeff Marshall is the director of the J9 Hosting and Compute at the Defense Information Systems Agency. Jeff, thanks so much for taking the time today.
Jason, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm Jason Miller, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the DoD Modernization Exchange.